Dear human being, beloved soul, I welcome you to my podcast series, Conversations with the Universe. After a near-death experience, my perception of our human existence changed profoundly. I became more sensitive, with all our known senses. I feel more intensely, see people with different eyes, and often take a different perspective on life and our challenges. In my books, I share these altered perspectives and all the knowledge that has flowed through me since my near-death and thus record it. For all those who are searching for something more, for the meaning of our existence here on Mother Earth. And it is now a great pleasure for me to share this knowledge with you in this way as a supplement to my books. This season I am dedicating myself to my very first work, the basics of being. I wish you many wonderful insights on your path. Thank you. Love.
The cosmos is a cycle that has, as its goal, the creation expanded by experience. The path to this goal goes through different stages of separation. The first, separation, only through the emergence of an individual form with consciousness, is the emergence of souls from the process of the first individual formation of the energy of the source. The movement away from the source now makes it possible to experience different forms of separation. On the one hand, the souls can experience individuality, but at the same time, through different levels of consciousness, they can recognize and experience other forms of connection. They experience non-separation through and in separation, for it is only the different frequency worlds that produce different forms, and through these enable different perceptions. Ultimately, however, it is the perception of one and the same energy, the energy of the source. In the lowest vibrating, most coarse material matter, the forms of expression of this energy create the strongest potential for such an experience of separation. And this experience of separation finds expression here on the earthly plane in the form of duality, which is only possible in this earthly materiality. Duality is a result of the energetic laws of this low frequency range. Distance from the source is the cause of the emergence of duality. Curiosity has moved the energies into this frequency range, and in duality, the counter-movement is now being challenged even more strongly. The experience of darkness makes the longing for light stronger. Here, in dense matter, duality forms the boundaries of our physical perception, and when something is physically separated, a kind of pole is created through the concentration of the energies that each act separately. Up and down, right and left, north and south, plus and minus, cold and warm, yin and yang, and so many more are all expressions of duality and thus poles of the same energy. The separation creates the two poles of observation, the observer and the observed. To be means to experience the unity of both. But since the more diverse expressions of energy are not truly separate from each other, the circumstances of the low frequency range between them create tension. This means that the tension is actually the connecting energy of the two energies of the poles. To simplify it a little more, we can say that it is precisely these tensions that form the basis for our life here in duality, because it is in duality that life happens. The cause and basis for rhythm, polarity, and gender, however, is duality. Duality extends into the first energy world. As a reminder, this is the level of elves, dwarves, and the deceased. One form of tension between the two poles is rhythm. This consists of regular states and changes that, bound to time and space, lead to different forms of expression of one and the same cause. The seasons are also a rhythm, but all in all they only reveal nature in its entirety. Life also runs in cycles and rhythms. Man is firmly embedded in these, and space and time are the laws of nature that create the space for him to develop himself and his spirit. Spiritual growth in the coarse materiality is always tied to a rhythm. The moment a soul incarnates into a body, the rhythm of life begins, and with it, the chance to grow spiritually. And this spiritual growth is only possible in rhythms on our level in duality. Spiritual rhythm here in matter looks like this. This sequence is called a cycle. Unfortunately, the majority of people do not manage to awaken even once in their entire lives. But you, as the reader of these lines, have made it. And now your soul finally wants to grow, work, and ultimately transform. These 4 stages are the stages of consciousness in the cycle of 22 stages of consciousness, which I have already explained to you in the chapter Consciousness. A person who is firmly bound in duality cannot climb an extremely large number of rungs on this ladder of consciousness in a lifetime. Among the few who are allowed to experience awakening, only a few make more than one step up this ladder. And as I have already described to you, the greatest expansions of consciousness are usually associated with suffering. In such a mental shock, it happens that the person who previously lived life blind and unawakened suddenly experiences an extreme breaking of his previous patterns and paths, and in this moment of calm finally begins to perceive his soul, the actual I, the forgotten part of the self. Then an opening happens, and with it an expansion of consciousness, a leap in consciousness. Through such experiences, a person can really climb many rungs of the ladder of consciousness in one go within a lifetime. At that moment, you could recognize the meaning of suffering in this world. Suffering creates an energetic state that accompanies people through a wide range of circumstances, bringing them to a point where they open themselves to everything they have never perceived. Actually, it's a great opportunity. But who likes to suffer? Isn't there another way? Another way to create several stages of consciousness in a single life? Yes, of course there is this way. But it requires intensive training and a disciplined call to silence. It requires a self-critical yet wide-open heart that wants to learn and knows that the teacher for this path is only the soul itself. I know that now, at the latest, everyone thinks that if you want to escape the path of suffering, it must be the monastery or the Buddhist temple. But that is a false interpretation. In duality, it is never advisable to remain at one extreme. But it is good to know the extremes. But after these experiences of the extremes, balance is even more important. Finding and knowing the middle. Humans are not made to live in duality with only one pole. In their best potential, they are located exactly in the middle of these 2 poles, where the energies flow and meet in equal parts. No, it is not the standstill you might expect in the middle. Quite the opposite. I can understand the assumption, since people often tend to perceive something extreme as more alive. And as so often in this world, on this planet, this is once again an illusion. But who can tell you where it is? The golden mean? Unfortunately, we don't learn that at school either. Every person is a different country, and every map is different. Your journey in search of answers will clearly show you the moments when you feel more balanced, calm, and above all happy than ever before in your life. That's where your center smells. Is there actually such a thing as standstill? I like this question because it takes on extremely different forms depending on the level we look at it from. And the way you answer this question also reveals the level of consciousness and the level you are currently at. In the material world as you know it, viewed from a very specific perspective, there is standstill. Nevertheless, it is actually possible for a person to do an enormous amount every day, experience a lot, and still be as exhausted in the evening as if they had fought wars, but at the same time, their consciousness experiences absolute standstill. The belief patterns, the thinking, and also the feelings, the whole world view. And based on that, every single decision made are as rigid as a stone. Thus, precious years, if not an entire life, can pass in an endless mass of tasks, yet the consciousness was not moved a single moment. Duality creates 3 spaces. The 2 spaces of the poles and the space in between the space of your possibilities. Of course, free will is the tool that a person who loses themselves in actionism also uses to make their decision for their path. This is to be respected. However, despite all this, one of the main objectives of my work is to make people aware of where the dangers lie. This enables people to make more conscious choices, and that alone is a movement, and thus my intention. Embedded in a world that exists due to the areas of tension between the two poles, every person comes to a point in their lives several times where the other side, the other pole, clearly shows itself and calls. Duality is so present that it also reminds us again and again that it is dual, and each time we have to decide whether we want to remain frozen in our rigidity or start to move. As always, the responsibility lies with ourselves. Start opening your consciousness and observe what your world of duality looks like. Where do you find the extremes? How do they show themselves to you? Take a close look at them, experience them for a moment or a little longer, and find their limits. And once you know the limits of the extremes in your life, you know your land. And once you know that, you will find the center. As is so often the case in life, knowing certain things is not enough. It does not help you to know that duality exists and that you are firmly embedded in it. You can only find your center by experiencing the extremes. But that takes time, and as we all know, time is very precious and cannot be retrieved. Never again. If you manage to use your free will to act between your two extreme poles, then duality will no longer be a straitjacket for you, but a platform for the personal development of your consciousness. It is important that you know what potential exists for you and your life in this middle between the two extremes. As long as you are afraid to explore the extremes, as long as you interpret the middle as a standstill, and as long as you think you have to avoid it, you are the plaything of this law. Then you feel tossed back and forth between the events in your life. But from the moment you recognize this full potential, you turn the tide and become the player who decides for himself whether and when the ball flies where. Again, it is important not to see the circumstances of the laws that apply in this world as restrictive, but to learn to love and live the great freedom and the many possibilities that they offer you. So let's summarize. Duality is one of the main laws of course material and thus of our life in it. Polarity and rhythm are results of this duality. Duality is the challenge to balance. It makes it possible to find an impulse for the movement of consciousness out of its powerlessness and to work out of the center through the experience of extremes. Life takes place between these extremes. Time and space are the siblings of duality, and they create the basis for rhythm. This can only arise in a certain space and in a certain sequence of time. The two poles, the extremes, offer this space in which the rhythm can take place. Thank you for listening and growing with me. Carpe Vitam, seize your life. And I would like to remind you to join our community Spine. We are a community that wants to help you live a healthier life, practice your spirituality, and expand your consciousness. We help you find and connect with healers around the world, and we help you give your life a new meaning in different ways. We are Spine, connections that help.